They dragged the rejected Omega to break her bond, but the moon goddess marked her instead. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Isla had always been different. As an Omega in a world where power was everything, she was nothing more than a shadow of what others expected her to be. A weak, helpless creature, easily overlooked, easily discarded. Her pack had rejected her long ago, casting her aside when they found out she couldn't shift. They labeled her broken, worthless. But Isla wasn't the only one who felt the sting of rejection. Alpha Damien, leader of the pack, had never looked at her with anything but disdain. And yet, here she was, bound and dragged through the cold forest, her hands tied behind her back, heading toward a fate she could neither control nor avoid. The others in her pack wanted to break her bond with them, to erase any trace of her existence, so she would disappear, just like the broken things they deemed her to be. She had no hope, no strength left to fight back. Her heart ached with every step, and yet, as she walked, she couldn't shake the strange pull in her chest, as if something, or someone, was calling to her from the very depths of the forest. They stopped at an ancient stone, a place Isla had never seen before. The wind whispered through the trees, and in that moment, Isla felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something was happening. She couldn't explain it, but it felt as though the forest itself was alive, watching her. The men who had dragged her here stood back, watching her with cruel smiles. Break her bond, and she'll be nothing, one of them sneered. Isla's eyes filled with tears, but there was a strength in her that she hadn't noticed before. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, though she didn't know who she was praying to. And that's when it happened. A light, soft but powerful, began to glow around her, radiating from within. The moon goddess had marked her. The world seemed to stop, as if the very air had become charged with magic. Isla's heart raced, and before she knew it, a voice, deep and resonant, filled her mind. You are not broken. You are chosen. Her eyes flew open, and for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The men around her stared in shock as a symbol appeared on her skin, glowing with divine energy. It was a mark of the moon goddess. Isla wasn't just an Omega. She was destined for something far greater than she had ever imagined. The power surged through her veins, and with it, the knowledge that her life was about to change forever. She wasn't broken. She was chosen. Isla stood there, her heart still racing, as the glowing mark on her skin pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The men who had dragged her to this forsaken place now looked at her with fear, their smug expressions replaced with confusion. Isla didn't know what had just happened, but she could feel it deep within her, a shift in the very core of her being. The light that had surrounded her seemed to fade, leaving behind a quiet, almost deafening silence. The cold wind of the forest had stilled, and everything around her felt different. The moment felt like it was stretching, timeless, and for the first time, Isla didn't feel weak. She didn't feel broken. She felt power, raw and untapped, surging through her veins. It was as though the moon goddess herself had reached down and touched her, chosen her to stand above everything she had ever known. Isla, the voice inside her mind spoke again, gentle but powerful. You are not just any Omega. You are the mate of the Alpha King. The words echoed in her head, and she blinked, trying to make sense of them. The mate of the Alpha King, she thought, her mind racing. But before she could think further, Alpha Damien's voice cut through the silence, snapping her back to reality. What is this? He demanded, his voice laced with anger and disbelief. What have you done? Isla turned to face him, her legs steady beneath her. The mark on her skin burned brightly, as if in response to his words. She had always been the one to bow her head, to shrink back in the face of authority. But now she stood tall, her posture straight, her chin lifted in defiance. The men who had once tormented her now stood frozen, their eyes wide with fear. I haven't done anything, Isla said, her voice calm and steady. But I am no longer who I was. The moon goddess has chosen me. Damien's expression shifted from one of anger to something else, something Isla couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Was it awe? For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't hatred. He stepped forward, his imposing figure dwarfing her, but Isla didn't flinch. She was no longer the meek Omega who had been discarded. She was something more. Chosen. Damien scoffed, but his voice faltered slightly. You think this mark, makes you special? You're still nothing but an Omega. Isla's eyes narrowed. She didn't feel the sting of his words as she once would have. Instead, she felt the pull of something deep inside her, a connection to a power greater than anything she had ever known. I am not nothing, Isla replied, her voice firm. I am chosen, and that's more than you'll ever understand. The words hung in the air between them, thick with tension. The men around them shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in the power dynamic. Alpha Damien's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Isla wondered if he might strike her. But then, as if something had stopped him, he simply stood there, staring at her. Isla's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't break eye contact. The mark on her arm continued to glow, and with each passing second, she felt it grow stronger. Suddenly, Alpha Damien took a step back, his expression one of frustration and confusion. I don't have time for this, he muttered under his breath, before turning sharply and barking orders at the other men. Leave her. We're done here. As they began to walk away, Isla stood rooted to the spot, her mind still spinning with everything that had just happened. She was chosen. She was marked. The power that had always been out of reach was now hers. And as the last of the men disappeared into the woods, Isla knew this was only the beginning. The moon goddess had chosen her for a reason, and whether she was ready or not, Isla was about to step into a destiny that would change everything. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life was no longer in the hands of those who had cast her aside. Isla was no longer the broken Omega. She was something greater. And the Alpha King, whoever he was about to learn that she was not to be underestimated. As Isla stood alone in the clearing, her mind was a whirlpool of emotions, a mixture of confusion, awe, and something far stronger, determination. The moment the moon goddess had chosen her, something inside her had shifted. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega who had been cast aside by her pack. She was someone different now, someone powerful, someone who had a destiny greater than anything she had ever imagined. She touched the mark on her arm again, feeling its warmth and the pulse of power that surged through her, a connection that anchored her to something ancient and divine. You are the mate of the Alpha King, the voice echoed in her mind again, its message as clear as it had been when the mark appeared. Isla closed her eyes, trying to comprehend the enormity of what had just happened. She had always thought the Alpha King was a legend, a figure of terror and awe, someone who ruled with an iron fist and commanded fear from all those around him. But now, the realization hit her like a wave crashing against the shore. She was his mate. She didn't know where to start, how to even process this knowledge. Isla turned her gaze back toward the forest, her heart racing. She didn't know what her next move was. She had never felt so uncertain, but at the same time, she felt an undeniable pull toward the unknown. The power that had surged through her, the connection to the moon goddess, and now the revelation about the Alpha King. It was as if everything in her life had led up to this very moment. But Isla couldn't help but feel a gnawing fear. What did it mean to be the Alpha King's mate? Would he accept her? Would he even want her? She wasn't sure if she was ready for the answer to that question. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, breaking through the silence of the forest. Isla spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. She didn't know who or what to expect. For a moment, everything stood still, and then she saw him, the Alpha King, standing in the clearing, his presence overwhelming. He was tall, his figure imposing, radiating power and confidence. His dark hair fell in waves around his broad shoulders, and his sharp features were set in a cold expression that didn't reveal much of what he was thinking. His eyes, though, they were a piercing silver, glowing with an intensity that made Isla's heart skip a beat. She had never seen eyes like that before, eyes that seemed to pierce right through her, reading her every thought, every fear. Isla, his voice was low and commanding, yet there was a note of something softer underneath, something she couldn't quite grasp. He took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. You've come a long way, but now you must face the truth. Isla's breath caught in her throat as she realized that the Alpha King, the one she had been destined to meet, was standing before her. There was no turning back now. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but the mark on her skin burned brighter, as though urging her to take the next step. I never expected to find you here, in the heart of the forest, he continued, his eyes studying her intently. But it seems fate has a different plan for you. Isla swallowed hard, trying to find her voice. I don't understand. Why me? Why the moon goddess chose me? She could feel her heart racing, her thoughts a jumble of confusion and fear. You are not just any Omega, he said, his voice almost too calm, too assured. You are the one the moon goddess has marked, the one meant to stand by my side, to be my Luna. Isla blinked, still processing his words. But I'm nothing. I'm just a rejected Omega. I don't even have a wolf, she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. The Alpha King stepped closer, his gaze softening for the briefest of moments. You are more than you think, Isla. Your true strength is not in what others have told you, but in what you've yet to discover within yourself. Isla felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her, and for the first time, she began to believe them. She wasn't nothing. She wasn't broken. She was chosen. The silence stretched between them, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if the world itself had paused, giving them both a moment to understand the gravity of what was happening. Isla, the once broken Omega, the one rejected and forgotten, was now standing before the Alpha King, her fate sealed by the moon goddess. There was no going back now, and as she stood there, her heart still racing, she realized that she was ready to face whatever came next, no matter how uncertain the road ahead might be. As Isla stood before Alpha Damien, the weight of his words sank deeper into her chest, settling like a stone she couldn't escape. Her entire life had been built on the idea that she was worthless, that she would never amount to anything. But here, in this clearing with the Alpha King standing before her, everything was different. The moon goddess had marked her, and she was no longer the broken Omega who had been discarded. She was chosen, destined for something greater. Still, doubt lingered in the back of her mind. She had no wolf, no true strength. How could she possibly stand by the Alpha King's side, let alone be his Luna? But as she looked into Damien's silver eyes, she saw something she had never seen before, a flicker of something like hope, something far softer than the cold, unyielding ruler she had expected. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, but Isla did not retreat. She stood her ground, her heart pounding, as if her body recognized something deeper within him. He was not just a king. He was a man who had been broken by the weight of his own responsibilities, a man who needed her as much as she needed him. Isla, he said, his voice low but steady. You think you are weak, but you are stronger than you realize. The moon goddess saw that in you. He paused, studying her carefully, and for the first time, Isla saw the uncertainty behind his eyes. You are not here by chance, he continued. You are here because you were meant to be, as my Luna, as my equal. Isla felt the air around her thicken, as if the very forest itself was holding its breath. She couldn't deny the intensity of the connection that had sparked the moment she laid eyes on him. Her heart still raced, but it wasn't from fear, it was from something else. Something primal. But I don't have a wolf, Isla said, her voice barely a whisper. How can I be your Luna if I am not like the others? Alpha Damien's expression softened, and he reached out, his hand gently lifting her chin, making her meet his gaze. You are more than you think, Isla. You have a strength that no one else has, something beyond what any wolf could understand. You were chosen because you are different, not despite it. Her breath caught in her throat as his words washed over her. She wasn't sure what to make of them, but the sincerity in his voice left her no room for doubt. Isla had always been told she was weak, broken, and now here she was, standing before the Alpha King, being told she had something no one else did. It felt impossible, but as she looked at Damien, she knew in her heart that this was just the beginning. The path ahead will not be easy, he continued, his voice low. But I swear to you, I will protect you. I will help you find your strength, and together we will lead this pack. Isla nodded slowly, still processing everything. She felt the weight of his words, the promise in them, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. The power inside her, the mark on her skin, it was real. She was not just an Omega. She was someone chosen by fate, chosen to be with him. What do I need to do? Isla asked, her voice filled with quiet determination. Alpha Damien smiled, a hint of warmth breaking through the cold exterior he had so carefully crafted. For now, you need to come with me. The pack needs to see you, to understand what you are. He reached out, offering his hand to her, and Isla hesitated for only a moment before taking it. As their fingers intertwined, a surge of power coursed through her, as if the connection between them had unlocked something deep within her. Together they turned and walked deeper into the forest, toward the pack. Isla didn't know what awaited her there, but she was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever challenges came next, ready to embrace her destiny. She was chosen. She was no longer the broken Omega. She was the mate of the Alpha King, and nothing could ever change that. As Isla walked beside Alpha Damien, the weight of what had just happened began to settle in her chest, still as heavy as a stone. The forest seemed to be alive around them, the trees towering above, their branches swaying gently, as if to acknowledge the monumental shift that had taken place. Her hand, still holding his, felt like a spark of electricity running through her body. She couldn't help but wonder what it meant, this connection. Was it real? Was she truly destined to stand by his side? Every step they took toward the pack felt like a step into the unknown. Isla had spent her life being overlooked, discarded, but now she was about to face an entire pack, a community of wolves, as the Alpha King's mate. A part of her was terrified. How would they accept her? Would they see her as the broken Omega she had always believed herself to be? Or would they see her as the moon goddess had marked her? As something greater? Damien glanced at her, his silver eyes softening just a fraction. You're quiet, he observed, his voice gentle, but there was an edge to it, a hint of concern. Isla felt the tension in her shoulders, the uncertainty swirling in her chest. I'm just trying to understand it all, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought I'd be here, let alone walking with you, with everything changing so fast. Damien nodded, his face hardening slightly, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his gaze, something that told her he understood more than he let on. The world isn't kind to those who are different, he said, his voice low and steady. But you are not like the others, Isla. You've always known that, haven't you? The mark you carry, it is a blessing, not a curse. Isla looked up at him, meeting his intense gaze, and for the first time since the mark had appeared on her skin, she felt a flicker of hope stir in her chest. She was no longer an outcast, no longer invisible. She was marked, chosen by the moon goddess herself. She was meant for something greater. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered, more to herself than to him. But I have to try. Damien's expression softened, and he gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. You don't have to be ready, he said, his voice thick with meaning. Not right away. I'll be here to guide you. We'll face this together. His words were comforting, and Isla found herself leaning into them, letting them settle deep within her heart. She was not alone. For the first time in her life, she had someone by her side who believed in her. As they continued walking through the forest, the clearing ahead began to come into view, and with it, the sounds of the pack. Isla's heart skipped a beat as the realization of what was happening hit her again. She was about to meet the pack. She was about to be seen by them, not as the weak Omega they had once rejected, but as the Alpha King's mate. What would they think? How would they react? Damien must have sensed her nervousness, for he squeezed her hand again and gave her a reassuring smile. They will see what I see, he said quietly. They will see that you are more than they think, more than you think. And they will respect you. Isla nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself as they entered the clearing. The pack was gathered, their eyes immediately drawn to her and Damien as they approached. The air was thick with the scent of wolves, their various aromas mingling in the cool evening air. The moment they arrived, a hush fell over the crowd. Isla's heart pounded in her chest as every pair of eyes turned to her, and she felt the weight of their gazes on her. But Damien stood tall beside her, his presence commanding, and slowly, one by one, the pack members began to bow their heads in respect. Isla felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief and disbelief. They were bowing to her, not just to the Alpha King, but to her, as his mate. The moment felt surreal, but it was happening. She was being accepted, not for what she had been, but for what she was becoming. As the last of the pack members lowered their heads, Damien stepped forward, his voice ringing out in the silence. "This is Isla," he said, his tone unwavering. "My mate, and the future Luna of this pack. She is marked by the moon goddess, and she will lead beside me, as my equal." The words settled over Isla like a warm blanket, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly acknowledged. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was a leader, a Luna, and nothing would ever be the same again. The pack's acceptance was not just a formality. It was a promise, a new beginning for Isla, and for the pack as a whole. And as she stood there, her hand still in Damien's, Isla knew that she was ready to embrace this new life, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. The moon goddess had chosen her, and with that blessing, she would face whatever came next. As Isla stood in the center of the clearing, surrounded by the pack, the weight of their acceptance began to settle in her chest. It felt almost too much to bear, the promise of a new beginning, the heavy responsibility that now rested on her shoulders. She had never imagined a day like this, never thought she would stand before so many wolves, let alone as the mate of Alpha Damien. The murmurs of the pack slowly died down, but Isla's heart was still pounding in her chest. She had been cast aside by her family, rejected by her pack, and now she was being asked to lead beside the most powerful wolf in the land. The tension in the air was palpable, and Isla couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't sure if she was ready for what was to come. Damien's presence beside her was a steadying force, his hand resting gently on her back, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. "You're doing fine," he whispered to her, his voice warm and reassuring, just loud enough for her to hear. She glanced up at him, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something that softened his usual hard exterior. It was trust. "I never imagined I would be here," Isla confessed softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I would be accepted, let alone lead beside you." Damien's eyes softened as he looked at her, his hand gently brushing against hers. "You're not here by chance, Isla," he said firmly, his voice strong but tender. "You were always meant to be here. You've always had the strength, even if you didn't see it yourself. The moon goddess chose you for a reason, and I believe in you." Isla felt a warmth in her chest at his words, a flicker of hope she had never allowed herself to feel before. She had spent so long believing she was nothing, believing she would never amount to anything, but now, standing beside him, she realized she had always been more than she had known. Slowly, the pack began to settle, the tension in the air dissipating as the wolves accepted her presence among them. It was not just the mark on her skin that had won their respect. It was her very essence, the strength that was rising inside her with each passing moment. Damien's voice broke through the quiet. "Isla is now our Luna," he declared, his voice carrying across the clearing. "She is chosen by the moon goddess herself, and she will lead beside me. We will face the challenges ahead together." The words sent a ripple of approval through the pack, and for the first time, Isla felt a sense of belonging. It wasn't just the pack's respect she had earned, it was their acknowledgement of who she truly was. The Omega that had once been broken was now standing tall, embraced by the pack, and ready to embrace the future. "You are no longer the rejected Omega," Damien continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "You are our Luna, our equal. The strength you've carried within you all this time will guide us." Isla stood taller, her back straight as she felt the energy in the air shift. The pack was no longer just a group of wolves. They were her pack now. They were her family, and she was their leader. As the Alpha King's mate, she would face whatever challenges came next with him by her side, but she knew she was ready. The moon goddess had chosen her for a reason. She wasn't just the mate of the Alpha King. She was Isla, and she would prove to herself and to the world that she was worthy of this life, this destiny. "Thank you," Isla whispered, her voice steady now, though her heart still raced. "Thank you for believing in me." Damien smiled softly, his eyes full of pride. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice gentle. "You've always had this strength inside you. I just helped you see it." The pack stood in silence for a moment, their eyes on the two of them, the bond between Alpha and Luna now forged. Isla felt it, felt the power of the connection between her and Damien, the strength of their bond, and she knew, deep in her soul, that together they would lead the pack into a new era. The challenges ahead would not be easy, but Isla was no longer afraid. She was chosen. She was powerful. And with Damien by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. As Isla stood at the forefront of the pack, her heart swelled with a mix of emotions, pride, fear, hope, all swirling together in a way that left her both overwhelmed and exhilarated. The pack had accepted her, and the weight of her new title as Luna sat heavy on her shoulders. But the truth was, she wasn't entirely sure what that meant yet. The days ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, tests of strength, both physical and emotional. But for the first time, she felt ready to face them. The journey of transformation that had started with her being cast aside by her own family had led her to this moment, to this pack, to Damien, and to a destiny she had once thought impossible. She glanced at Damien, who stood beside her, his presence a constant source of strength. His unwavering confidence had always been one of his most defining traits, and now, as her mate, she could feel that confidence helping her rise to the occasion. He looked at her, his gaze full of understanding, and gave her a small nod. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but filled with a warmth she hadn't expected. Isla took a deep breath, feeling the mark on her arm pulse slightly, as if in response to his words. The power inside her was undeniable now, the power of the moon goddess, the power of her bond with Damien, and the power of the pack that stood behind her. She wasn't just standing here as his mate, she was standing here as his equal. "I am," she answered, her voice steady and clear. "I'm ready." The pack watched silently, waiting for the next steps. Damien turned to face the group, his commanding presence filling the space. "We have a future to build together," he said, his voice strong. "Isla and I will lead this pack, and together, we will face the challenges that lie ahead. This pack is not just mine. It is ours." A wave of approval rippled through the wolves, and for the first time, Isla saw something different in their eyes. Respect, not just for Damien, but for her as well. They had accepted her, not just as his mate, but as their Luna. Damien's declaration filled her with a sense of purpose, and she knew that this was her time to step into the role she had been chosen for. "The time of division is over," Damien continued. "Together, we will unite, protect each other, and grow stronger than we have ever been. This is the future we are forging, and it will be one of strength, loyalty, and unity." Isla could feel the power of his words sinking deep into the pack's collective spirit. This wasn't just about her becoming Luna. It was about building something greater, something that would change the very foundation of their lives. It was about embracing her place in this world, her place beside Damien. And she was ready for that. The pack began to shift, their movements a subtle show of support. Isla felt the eyes of each wolf on her, some filled with doubt, others with curiosity, but most with respect. She had earned her place among them, not just as Alpha Damien's mate, but as the leader they needed. As she stood there, a weighty silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the sounds of nature around them. The air felt charged, filled with the promise of change, the beginning of something new. Isla reached out and took Damien's hand, her fingers wrapping around his with a firm, steady grip. "We'll do this together," she said, her voice full of conviction. Damien gave her a proud smile, squeezing her hand gently. "Together," he agreed. The moment felt timeless, the bond between them unbreakable, and Isla knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. As the pack watched, they knew this was the beginning of a new era for them, a new era led by the Alpha King and his Luna, and together, they would ensure the survival and prosperity of their pack. For Isla, the journey had only just begun, but she was no longer the broken Omega. She was the Luna of the pack, the mate of the Alpha King, and she would lead with strength, grace, and love, alongside the man who had shown her the power of believing in herself. As Isla stood at the center of the pack, the weight of her new responsibilities settled deeper into her chest, a constant reminder that her life had irrevocably changed. The mark on her skin, still glowing faintly under the light of the moon, pulsed with a power that she was only beginning to understand. She had come from a place of rejection, a place where she was invisible, overlooked, and now, She was the Luna of the pack, the chosen mate of Alpha Damien, a position of immense power and responsibility. Every moment since the declaration of her bond with Damien had been a whirlwind, but now, as she looked around at the faces of the pack, she could feel the weight of their expectations. They were looking to her for leadership, for guidance, and it was clear that their future lay in the balance. "Are you ready for this?" Damien's voice broke through her thoughts, soft yet filled with determination. She turned to face him, meeting his steady gaze. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something she recognized. The same uncertainty that had been there when they first met, the same hope. It was the hope of a future they would build together, and that hope was now tied to her. She took a deep breath, feeling the power within her stir, the power of the moon goddess, the power of the pack, the power of their bond. She was ready. "I am," she said, her voice firm, though it trembled slightly with the weight of the words. She wasn't sure if she was truly ready, but one thing she knew for sure was that she couldn't do it alone. And she didn't have to. With Damien by her side, and the pack's respect, she could lead them into the future. Damien gave her a small nod, his lips curving into a slight smile. "Then let's begin," he said, his voice filled with quiet strength. They turned toward the pack, who had been watching silently, waiting for their Luna to speak. Isla's heart raced, but she straightened her back and lifted her chin, a surge of confidence flowing through her. She was no longer the weak, rejected Omega. She was their Luna, and they would see that. "My pack," she began, her voice carrying across the clearing. "We stand at the crossroads of our future. No longer will we be divided by past mistakes or fears. We are stronger together than we have ever been before, and I swear to you, I will lead us into a new era. One where we fight for each other, where we protect each other, and where we thrive as a united pack." The pack members exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others still unsure, but the weight of her words was undeniable. Isla felt the truth of them deep in her bones. She had never felt more certain of anything in her life. "Damien and I will lead together," Isla continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "We will be a pack of warriors, of healers, of fighters. We will stand by each other's side, no matter what challenges the world throws our way. The moon goddess has chosen us, and we will not fail." As the final words left her mouth, a ripple of approval spread through the pack. Some of the wolves stepped forward, their eyes full of respect, while others held back, uncertain but hopeful. Damien stepped beside her, his presence steady and reassuring, and together they faced the pack. "This is only the beginning," Damien said, his voice strong and resolute. "Together, we will rebuild what has been broken. Together, we will honor the bond we share with each other, with the land, and with the moon goddess." Isla glanced at him, the connection between them undeniable. She was no longer just his mate. She was his equal, his partner in everything. They had both been chosen for this, and together, they would lead the pack into a future they had only dreamed of. The pack members, one by one, stepped forward, kneeling before them, not in submission, but in acceptance. The air was thick with the power of their unity, and Isla felt it settle into her very being, as if she were becoming one with them, one with the earth, one with Damien. This was her new reality. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She wasn't broken. She wasn't weak. She was their Luna, and she would show them that she was more than they had ever imagined. As the last of the wolves kneeled, Isla looked out at the faces of her pack, her new family, and felt the fire of determination burn within her. They had chosen her, and she would not let them down. The future was theirs to shape, and Isla would be the one to lead them to greatness. As Isla stood with Alpha Damien at the head of the pack, the future stretched out before her, vast and uncertain, but filled with the kind of promise she had never dared to imagine. The pack, once divided by fear and distrust, was now unified under their leadership, bound by a shared vision of strength, loyalty, and the deep bond forged by the moon goddess. The wolves around her, once wary of her as the weak Omega who had been cast aside, now looked to her with respect, even admiration. The weight of her new role as Luna was heavy, but with Damien by her side, she knew she could bear it. "We've come a long way," Damien's voice broke through her thoughts, steady and confident, as they walked through the camp together, the pack members acknowledging them with nods of respect. And we have much further to go. Isla looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and awe. He had been her anchor, her guide, and now, he was her partner in everything. The man who had once been a distant, almost unreachable figure was now the one who stood beside her, not just as her mate, but as her equal. I never thought I'd be here, Isla confessed softly, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the pack settling in for the night. I never thought I'd be the one leading them. But here I am. Here we are. Damien's eyes softened as he turned to her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. You've always had the strength, Isla. You've just had to find it. And now, you're showing everyone, including yourself, what you're capable of. Isla's heart fluttered at his words. She had spent so many years feeling small, insignificant, but with him, with the pack, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known. The power inside her, the mark of the moon goddess, had awakened something in her that was now undeniable. She was ready to face the challenges ahead, ready to lead the pack, and ready to walk beside Damien as they built a future together. As they reached the center of the camp, where the pack had gathered around a large fire, the atmosphere shifted. The wolves, though still wary of the unknown future, were beginning to see the change that had taken place, not just in their alpha, but in Isla as well. She was no longer the weak, discarded Omega. She was Luna, and her presence commanded their respect. Tonight, Damien announced, his voice strong, we celebrate our unity. We celebrate the strength we've gained together, the bonds that have been forged, and the future we will build as one. The pack erupted into cheers, their voices filling the night air with a sense of hope and determination. Isla stood beside Damien, feeling the warmth of the fire as it illuminated the faces of the pack. She had been chosen, marked by the moon goddess, and now, she was ready to embrace her destiny. The road ahead would not be without its challenges, but she knew, with Damien by her side and the pack behind her, they could face anything. The bond between them was unbreakable, and together, they would lead the pack into a new era. As the fire crackled and the pack celebrated their newfound unity, Isla felt a deep sense of peace settle within her. She had found her place, not just beside Damien, but within the pack. They were her family now, and she would protect them with everything she had. The future was no longer uncertain. It was theirs to shape, and with the moon goddess blessing, Isla knew they would thrive. The once broken Omega had found her strength, and in doing so, had found her purpose. And as the stars sparkled above, Isla's heart soared with the knowledge that she had finally found where she truly belonged. In a world ruled by power and destiny, Isla, a rejected Omega, finds herself unexpectedly chosen by the moon goddess in a powerful werewolf tale of transformation and fate. Cast aside by her pack and rejected by her family, Isla embarks on a journey to discover her true strength as the mate of the Alpha King, Damien. As she steps into the role of Luna, Isla must navigate the complexities of werewolf society, earning the respect of the pack she once thought would never accept her. With the power of the moon goddess and the love of her mate, Isla rises above her past, facing challenges that would test both her strength and her heart. In this gripping werewolf romance, Isla's journey from rejection to leadership is filled with emotional twists and undeniable connections. As she learns to embrace her role as Luna, she becomes a beacon of hope and power for the pack, proving that even the most broken Omega can rise to become a force to be reckoned with. In the end, Isla's story is a testament to the transformative power of love, strength, and the indomitable spirit of a werewolf destined for greatness.